Continue with the chapter reading of The Arabs at War by Mustafa Hamid. This chapter is called Mawlawi Mansour and Rashid's Establishment of the Qais Camp. And this is about 5 pages, so it's not that long. Mustafa Hamid. When Rashid worked with Mawlawi Mansour, he did many excellent things. One was his work on a magazine called Al-Surak, which was issued in Pashto and Persian and funded by Mawlawi Mansour. It was a truly unique magazine with which nothing before or after compared. It was a very high standard. They made 3 or 4 issues. Rashid said to me at the time, "You should teach the people how to make good analysis." There was excellent analysis in al-Sadaq, nearly all of which was comprised of his own political and military analysis, and it was distributed to the Afghans to raise their knowledge. Unfortunately, Mawlawi Mansour did not have the funding to keep the magazine going. I translated some of Rashid's articles because they were very good. Rashid had fought in Khost before I met him in Gardez, and so his articles about Khost were useful to me. I put 2 of his articles in my book. Although his work with Haqqani and on al-Sadaq was important, I think Rashid's biggest contribution was to training and the activities he set up when he helped Mawlawi Mansour establish the Qais camp, which operated in 1984. Rashid became the chief trainer and helped Mawlawi Mansour to find other instructors to train the Afghans, Taliban, and a group of Arabs. The contribution Rashid made along with Mawlawi Mansour in the Qais camp project came to have a lasting impact. In fact, the Qais camp was the first to receive a large number of Taliban belonging to Mawlawi Mansour, where they were provided with valuable military training. I was an eyewitness to this training and a participant in some of it. The establishment of Qais was an important step forward, particularly after efforts to develop training activities, including those of my friends and I, had failed to secure support. After our initial efforts to convince others of the need for a project to support the Mujahideen came to nothing, we decided we would have to provide some support to the Mujahideen ourselves. Though we had no money, we thought we could do some media and research work to make sure that the Muslims all over the world knew what was happening in Afghanistan. We also wanted to create a small training program to train the Arabs to support the Afghans and to share in the battles on a small scale, because until then, there were few opportunities to share in battle. We needed people to work with us, and we thought to call our project Maktab al-Almi al-Islami. I was responsible for creating this program, but at the time, Abdul Rasul Sayyaf and Ikhwan Muslimin had blacklisted me. Leah Farrall. Why were you blacklisted? Was this a result of you and your friends' early efforts to secure support? Mustafa Hamid. They suspected I was an enemy of jihad and was working against the Mujahideen by trying to exploit them, and that our project was really about making a new party for the Malawis of Afghanistan. Leah Farrall. I'm guessing that this is not what you were doing, but I am curious as to why there would have been a problem. Was it because of competition and rivalry between the groups and a fear of losing influences and resources? Mustafa Hamid. Yes. Campaigning against my friends and I meant that people became afraid to cooperate with our project. At the same time, my friends in Abu Dhabi did not have the money to assist us. I went to Peshawar to try to start the work under these circumstances. And when I arrived, I went to the house of my friend Jalaluddin Haqqani. There, you know who I found? Who? Leah Farrell says. Mustafa Hamid. Found there a group of Arabs. Among them were Abu Hafs al-Masri. Now, for those who don't know, Abu Hafs al-Masri is also known by Muhammad Atef, who is the military commander of Al-Qaeda. Abdul Rahman al-Masri, Abdul Rahman al-Iraqi, and Abdul Sabur, who is also known as Wadi al-Hajj. Now, that's a big name. Wadi al-Hajj, much like Abu Hafs al-Masri, was Al-Qaeda. Wadi al-Hajj was a financier of Osama bin Laden in the Sudan. and he was arrested when he came back to the United States because he had residency in Houston. He was given a life sentence for being a participant in the 1998 East Africa bombing. As you know, Abu Hafs became one of the founders of Al Qaeda, and Wadi al Hajj also became close to Abu Abdallah, that's another name for Osama bin Laden, and played an important role for him in Africa after 1993. This group was waiting for someone to take them to the front that they had been waiting for a long time because it was winter. I met them all, told them to join our project, the Maktab al-Alami al-Islami. I asked them to start on research about education for the Afghan refugees because Mawlawi Mansour was trying to focus on this area. Our group did excellent research work in this area. Abdul Rahman al-Iraqi and Abdul Sabur, in particular, made a big effort for several months and produced some very good research and education materials. It was a very good start, now. In fact, it formed the basis of educational assistance and programs for most of the Arab relief agencies in the field. They did not know we started the project. We also gave this material to others, such as the Sudanese ISRI Islamic Relief Agency. It was also the work we built upon the Kais camp with Rashid and Mawlawi Mansour. As I mentioned earlier, Mawlawi Mansour's program was not just about military training. He wanted to raise a new generation and realized that this required making sure the youth had a broader education than just learning how to use weapons. This is why his work focused on programs for educating Afghans, as well as training in areas of immediate needs like military and administrative work. He was the only one to do so. Through his early reform efforts and later with initiatives like the Kais camp, and this is why he was the real founder of the Taliban movement. Of everyone, he was the only one who had a vision for the Taliban into the future and worked towards it. Leah Farrall. Where was the Kais camp established? Mustafa Hamid. Mawlawi Mansour set up the Kais camp in the Sada area of Pakistan and the broader areas, where some training of Afghans had already taken place under the supervision of Pakistani intelligence personnel, the ISI. This earlier training was low level under the direction of conditions set by then President of Pakistan, General Zia-ul-Haq, who I had mentioned earlier, told his Director of Military Intelligence, Akhtar Abdul Rahman, that he wanted the war in Afghanistan to slowly boil. Pakistani had earlier trained Afghanis on how to fire weapons without training them on combat tactics. A significant number of Taliban from Mawlawi Mansour's group received their training in Kais. This training was more serious and of a higher quality than other Afghan camps because it was far away from the politics and the propaganda of the other Afghan parties. In fact, the Kais camp was first in terms of a historical significance in preparing the Taliban combat missions on the battlefield. Second was a frontline camp in the Zumat area, relatively close to the Gardez city. Trainers were Afghan because Pakistani trainers did not work in these areas, although Pakistani military intelligence were roaming everywhere, giving instructions or coordinating certain operations as just monitoring. The place of training in the Zermatt Valley, south of Gardez, the capital of Paktia, was the home area of Mawlawi Mansour and his tribe, the Andar, which stretches to the states of Paktia, Ghazani, and Paktia, and Paktika. When Mawlawi Mansour was in command of the front in Zermatt, the students of Sharia, Taliban, gathered around him for training and for participation in the field. It was not until much later that any specific grouping or organization was created for combat. And I think the first to think of this was Jalaluddin Haqqani, and he was. In fact, in my earlier studies and reading Ann Sterenson's fantastic work, Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, Haqqani was the first of the Afghan warlords to receive Arabs in their ranks. Then came Gulbuddin Hekmatyar and Abdul Rasul Sayyaf. Haqqani actually accepted the Egyptians who came first once they were released from the jails and at the I forgot the name of the one jail that's called infamous, that released the likes of Abu Hafs al-Masri, Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri, Dr. Saeed Imam al-Sharif, also known as Dr. Fadl, Abu Ubaida al-Banshiri, Mahmoud Salim. These are very, very big, prominent names, and they are the founders of what we know as the base, which is Al Qaeda in English, but the base meaning the the Sadat training camp in southern Afghanistan, the Lion's Den, as it was called. Um, Members of this group came from Jalaluddin Haqqani, and his family had helped train these people proper. Ali Muhammad is another one, triple agent himself. In an interview I had with Mawlawi Mansour, he told me that the Qais camp was independent in its training because he had hired Pakistanis who were no longer part of the military, but had previously served in the armed forces. The person who helped him to locate such trainers was Rashid. Although Rashid worked with Mansour on many projects, the main one was the Qais camp. By the autumn of 1984, training was underway at the Qais camp, and Arab volunteers attended 2 sessions. I was present at the first session with me and my friend Abdul Rahman al-Masri, who was martyred on Mount Togran in 1988, and Abu Hafs al-Masri, who was one of the 3 founders of al-Qaeda. In the second session, Abu Ubaidah al-Banshiri, who was also a founder of al-Qaeda, attended. And remember, Abu Ubaidah al-Banshiri and Abu Hafs al-Masri were from the Jalaluddin Haqqani camp. The Egyptians went there, and then they went to Qais. And from there, the Lion's Den. It was this training that made Abu Hafs and Abu Ubaidah excel in guerrilla warfare on the battlefield. That means that the Qais camp played an important role in preparing them to be able to train the others later. The al-Masada and Jij. Now, that's the Lion's Den. I said the al-Sadat. The al-Masada. Excuse me for the error. Al-Masada and Jij is where the first Arab camp, Arab-only camp, was built. Jij, the Battle of Jij, where they beat approximately, according to the stories and to the recorded history, a group of Arabs from the al-Masada camp headed by Osama bin Laden, like Abu Hafs al-Masri, Abu Ubaidah al-Banshiri, had defeated members of the Russian Spetsnaz. According to stories and according to lore, over 200. A remarkable victory. Even the Afghans were surprised and very shocked. How so, Leah Farrall? Mustafa Hamid. During the first session of the Qais camp, the group of Arabs listened to Rashid long enough, his long night lectures on the subject of guerrilla warfare. This was the guerrilla warfare and his vision for forming a military force of highly trained Afghans. This was the first time that Arab volunteers in Afghanistan listened to lectures in this form and on this subject. In fact, the Qais camp was unique because it was the first time that Arabs or Afghans had been formally trained in such things such as guerrilla warfare. Rashid taught us and gave lectures on guerrilla warfare. He initially did not go too deeply into the subject matter, but instead he gave it as a sort of introduction to the way he thought the project for jihad in Afghanistan should be prepared in order for it to be effective and organized. To explain this, he gave lectures on guerrilla warfare. He was the first one to teach guerrilla warfare to us, and from the point on forwards, we started to build a library for ourselves for reading and training. I was already familiar with the term, and I had read about it earlier in Egypt. With Rashid giving the lecture in English, Abdul Sabir and I translated it into Arabic. Abdul Rahman al-Iraqi printed the translations. He was always making jokes with all of us, making trouble. Abdul Sabir was always very nervous, but he worked very hard and was very organized. Actually, the effort we made together was also one of the first steps of training the Arabs in Afghanistan. That's the end of this chapter. Thank you very much for taking an interest in reading along with me. And together we'll learn more and more about pre-9/11, which helps us to explain about what happened on September 11, 2001. Thank you very much for checking in, and have a good evening. See you tomorrow.